From a legend killer to a legend in his own right, Randy Orton has had one of the most successful WWE careers ever, influencing multiple different generations of wrestling fans and being the model of consistency in the company. For 2 decades, Randy Orton has been a premier face for the WWE, and whether you hate the guy or you love the guy, you gotta respect him for the tenure. By no means the flashiest performer, not the guy who's gonna deliver 5-star classics with jaw-dropping moments, but someone who kept things simple and as a result has carved out a very long career for himself. As time has gone on, the genius of Randy Orton has started to really be appreciated. I've talked about the OVW 4 ad nauseum on this channel, and you guys already know how good the rookie class was, but for Randy, his story was one of getting in his own way, being your own worst enemy when everything was being handed to him on a silver platter. Randy had came into the WWE on his own accord after his parents basically said no to wrestling, knowing how hard the business was. Randy's dad, of course, Bob Orton, and his grandfather, Bob Orton Sr. So listening to his parents, Randy didn't originally become a wrestler. He went into the Marine, eventually going AWOL and getting discharged at 19 and also getting convicted, serving 38 days in military prison. The good thing for him was that he had already wrestled in high school and as an amateur, so the fallback plan was right there. He started training in St. Louis, which is actually not where he was born. He was born in Knoxville but ended up being billed from St. Louis. His dad showed him the ropes and he took to things very easily. It doesn't take much to see that he had all the fundamentals down. He was even a referee for a bit. Very quickly he was signed to a developmental deal where he'd mix things up with these four. He even won the 2001 PWI Rookie of the Year, beating out John Cena and Brock Lesnar. Cena said that his first impression of Orton was that he was a dick. Surprising coming from someone who's squeaky clean, a company guy who doesn't really say stuff to cause a stir. He mixed things up with future greats, eventually making his debut on April 25th, 2002, and there he was, a third generation stud ready to take over. 2002 was a year where a lot of things were changing for the WWE. Top stars were leaving, an influx of young talent. The company also changed their name. We were just months away from Vince McMahon ushering in the era of ruthless aggression, an era that Randy would become one of the poster boys for. He beat Hardcore Holly in his debut match on SmackDown, with the commentators hyping him up as the blue chip prospect of all blue chip prospects. And watching him in the ring, he was so smooth, from his movements to his technique, but sometimes even a first overall pick that's been given a generational tag doesn't always translate right away. He was traded over to Raw and suffered a shoulder injury, but what WWE did during this time was let him appear on TV when they ran his Randy News Network segments. Randy would essentially give breaking news reports on his injury in somewhat of a geeky form, saying things like, "My shoulder has 32% mobility," which slowly turned him into a narcissistic heel on screen. Elsewhere, Triple H was riding high as the World Heavyweight Champion, on and off of course, and he wanted to create a faction reminiscent of the Four Horsemen, and that plan included Randy Orton. In May of 2003, his shoulder was back to normal, and so out he came in a balaclava to help out Triple H and Ric Flair, and so it began. What was cool about Evolution's formation was, even though it was a stable, Randy's rise was almost a side story within the reign of Evolution. Whereas others like Cena and Batista had more of a struggle and took time to win their respective titles, Randy was given the prominent spotlight from the beginning. And in that spotlight were 2 words: legend killer. Orton started to target the older generation, and what you had was this young, douchey upstart whose sole purpose was to disrespect everything done before him. It started with him kicking Mick Foley down a flight of stairs. He got wins over the likes of Shawn Michaels, even becoming the sole survivor for Team Bischoff at Survivor Series, something that would become synonymous with his career as those traditional tag matches became his stomping ground. If HBK is Mr. WrestleMania, then Randy Orton can most definitely be called Mr. Survivor Series. In June of 2003, Orton debuted one of the most mainstream and well-recognized moves in the world, and that's the RKO, a move that he would hit out of nowhere, creating a catalog of highlight reel counters into the move. Before a lot of those highlights though, he had to do some winning, and it started at Armageddon 2003, where all members of Evolution were champions, Randy winning his first singles title, beating RVD for the Intercontinental Championship. At the following year's WrestleMania, he continued his feud with Mick Foley, Foley recruiting The Rock as a tag team partner, and Evolution was able to beat those two with Randy Orton getting the winning fall over Mick Foley. He eventually beat Mick Foley at Backlash 2004 in a hardcore match where Foley brought back his Cactus Jack character, a moment that can be pinpointed as Randy Orton's coming out party and a passing of the torch. A brutal match filled with so many extreme moments. Randy after this was spitting in Harley Race's face, beating the likes of Edge and Shelton Benjamin to keep his Intercontinental Championship before he eventually dropped it to Edge at Vengeance, ending his reign at just over 200 days. Randy then became the #1 contender for the World Heavyweight Championship that was held by Error 404. He was going to SummerSlam to possibly do it, and lo and behold, he did. Randy Orton in the main event became the World Heavyweight Champion at just 24 years old. 28 months into his run, just over 2 years in, he had ascended to the mountaintop. This also came at a time where Brock Lesnar left WWE, so they needed to rebuild that next big star, and they also tried to erase Lesnar's previous youngest champion ever record, so of course. The company felt as though Randy Orton was ready to take that next step. He had the look, he had the ability, but this run in the long term didn't do him that many favors, as everything that made him such a good bad guy was taken away when they turned him face the night after SummerSlam when he was kicked out of Evolution. In August of 2004, he also debuted Burn in My Light, which he said that he hated with a passion. Eventually, he gave Vince a CD that featured Killswitch Engage's This Fire Burns, which he got to use for a week before Vince went, nah, that song doesn't really fit you. That was in 2006, but let's go back to 2004 for a second. His world title run lasted all of 28 days before he dropped it back to Triple H at Unforgiven. The plan headed into the next year for WrestleMania was for him to beat Triple H at Mania 21, but as they say, plans change, and they did. His face run was a mess. It didn't work. What also didn't help was he was made to look like a complete chump for most of it, even later admitting that the writers screwed him over and that he was a natural heel. He himself knew that him being a heel was what was best for business. By the end of 2004, the RKO started to be presented as a top tier move. Again, Randy Orton became a sole survivor at Survivor Series. Batista caught fire and he instead took that role of the good guy against Triple H for WrestleMania, leaving Orton out of the world title picture. But I think we can all agree that it was for the better. After a few attempts at the world title, WWE turned him heel again and he set his sights on The Undertaker's 12-0 undefeated streak. And this was a whole different monster, a game-changing rivalry that made him one of the most detestable versions of himself. And how could I forget, a week before WrestleMania, he RKO'd his own girlfriend on live TV. He couldn't get the job done at WrestleMania, though he had a great performance reversing the chokeslam into an RKO. WWE originally wanted Randy Orton to get the win, reinforcing his legend killer persona, but Randy respectfully declined, breaking the streak. Being in his mid-20s, Randy was still very immature, partying, enjoying the benefits of fame at such an early age. This caused him to not take his job as seriously as he should have, including missing the rehearsal for WrestleMania. The night after that show, Orton injured his shoulder again. When he returned, the rest of the year for him was spent in a rivalry against The Undertaker. He beat Taker at SummerSlam, eventually losing in a Hell in a Cell match to end the year. A variety of legendary visuals and iconic moments came from this rivalry, from Orton lighting a casket on fire to driving a lowrider in reverse to kill him on Eddie Guerrero's tribute show, no less. I still can't believe they actually did that, to lighting a check on fire and even faking his own retirement. This rivalry did a lot for Orton. Most importantly, it put him back on the right track. 2006 came rolling along and he entered at number 30 during the Royal Rumble. Couldn't get the job done, but he weaseled his way into the world title match anyways, getting heel heat saying that Eddie was in hell following his death. Orton later admitted that he was 100% not comfortable with the angle, but Ray told him to go on with it. At WrestleMania 22, he was part of a triple threat match including Kurt Angle and Rey Mysterio for the World Heavyweight Championship, but didn't win it even though he was scheduled to. Why he didn't win it was because of his attitude. After Mania, Randy was suspended for unprofessional conduct, with it attributed to anger management issues, but it was actually a suspension for violating the wellness policy after smoking weed backstage. Someone smelt it and snitched him out. He also had anger management issues, so he had to attend a 4-week anger management camp in Atlanta, costing him $15,000 because he was literally a loose cannon. Rochelle Lowen used to work for the WWE, and she said that he was an animal after he poured suntan oil in her bag because she didn't know his name when they first met. So clearly, he was a guy who expected you to know who he was. At one point, he even slut-shamed Kelly in 2011, saying that he could name 10 different wrestlers that she slept with. There was even a story that emerged that when a new writer would show up, Randy would come into the room, put his hand down his pants, pull out his dick, touch himself, and then proceed to shake their hand. If they didn't shake his hand, he thought they were big leaguing him. When he came back, he had a brief program with Kurt Angle, and then at SummerSlam got into another big time match when he took on Hulk Hogan in a match labeled The Legend versus The Legend Killer. He didn't end up winning, but nonetheless, more big time exposure for him. But you guys know that saying where sometimes people just find each other? Yeah, in 2006, two psychopaths found each other, and that was Edge and Randy Orton. Edge was really on his way to becoming the heel of the Ruthless Aggression era, but Orton shared that same spot. You can debate which one is better, but when put together, they were every child's nightmare, the two being known as Rated RKO, and they could have very well been known as Rated F the entire roster. These two were leaving a path of destruction, leaving everyone laying, winning the tag titles, beating the likes of DX in the process too. By WrestleMania 23, the group split up with Randy and Edge competing in the Money in the Bank ladder match. Randy was still a dude doing some pretty odd things though. In April of 07, he got sent home from a European tour after causing $50,000 worth of damages to a hotel room. WWE reported him getting sent back as a stomach virus. Actually think about that though. What do you have to do to cause $50,000 worth of damage to a hotel room? Probably a reason as to why he only had one world title up until this point. There were even talks that this would be his final straw in the company and that he'd end up being fired. He didn't though. Orton thought that he was untouchable, that he was a god amongst men. 5 years on the main roster and maturity was still a problem. He kept his job and he was part of a great fatal 4-way match with Shawn Michaels, Edge, and John Cena at Backlash. The problems persisted though when the signature pharmacy scandal emerged, and Randy Orton's name was among a list of wrestlers that were revealed to have purchased steroids from the pharmacy. Randy didn't end up getting suspended, with WWE saying that Orton fessed up to his dealings with the pharmacy a few months previous. He had received the steroids in 2004, so the wellness policy wasn't in effect. At the time, he was involved in a rivalry with John Cena. By July of 2007, he became another level of destructive, adding the punt kick to his arsenal and becoming the #1 contender to the WWE Championship held by John Cena. These two, for the longest time, were the company's first and second biggest stars. I compare them to Crosby and Ovechkin for their dominance and how they were the go-to stars of that generation. 1A and 1B, or A and B if you will. The rivalry between these two was something that fans got really tired of as time went on. It was a formula that WWE would revert to when there was nothing else to do. Early on though, there was excitement. Randy couldn't win the WWE title at SummerSlam 2007, and then the night after, he just casually punts out John Cena's dad. Randy also couldn't win the title at Unforgiven either. Cena though ended up tearing his pectoral before the two were scheduled to wrestle at No Mercy in a last man standing match, so Randy just got presented the WWE title to start the show. Crazy that he never actually won his first true WWE title in a match. He ended up losing it to Triple H. Triple H then defended that title against Umaga before eventually losing it back to Orton come night's end in a last man standing match that was very, very enjoyable. Now he went on a 203-day championship reign, defending it against Shawn Michaels, Jeff Hardy, Chris Jericho, and John Cena. During this time, he would use the most nefarious ways to retain the title, from getting HBK's Sweet Chin Music banned to attacking Jeff Hardy's brother. We were now in 2008 and John Cena returned from his injury and won the Royal Rumble, Cena choosing Orton as his opponent. But the match wasn't at WrestleMania, this was at No Way Out, where Orton slapped the ref to retain the championship. The same night, Triple H became the #1 contender, leading us to an eventual triple threat match at WrestleMania. Faced off against the entire Raw roster with John Cena, iconic clip. At WrestleMania 24, Orton retained the WWE title, eventually dropping it to Triple H at Backlash. Orton then got injured at One Night Stand. He was gone for 4 months with a broken collarbone. During his rehab, he injured that same collarbone in a motorcycle accident, and when he returned, he was the most lethal version of himself, skin fade Randy Orton. And now it was time for him to lead his own group, the group known as Legacy. This featured Cody Rhodes, Ted DiBiase, and of course, Randy himself. By January of 2009, Randy was ready to start tormenting the McMahons and having his most ruthless year. He won the 2009 Royal Rumble and eventually chose Triple H to face for the WWE title, everything linking back to Evolution, tormenting the McMahons, even going as far as to punting Vince in the head, ruining Shane, planting a kiss on an unconscious Stephanie McMahon, and then he got repaid in the form of a home invasion courtesy of Triple H. Though the angle was hot, the match was as cold as you could get, main eventing WrestleMania 25, which had already seen Undertaker and Shawn Michaels steal the show earlier in the night. This one was extremely poorly received. A blood feud and an extremely poor payoff. Randy eventually won the WWE title back in a 6-man tag match at Backlash. Legacy was put in a strong position to succeed. Orton defended the title against Batista, losing it to him at Extreme Rules. When Batista vacated it, Orton won it back, winning his 4th WWE title and 5th world title overall. In the process, he was verbally and physically abusing Legacy, continued his feud with John Cena through the final few months of the year, the two trading the WWE Championship back and forth. His 2009 run was really a breakout year, weird considering how long he'd already been around up until that point, but it's the year that many look back at as his best character work, saying so much without saying anything at all, using his facial expressions to tell stories. He was deranged, he was psychotic, some would even say he was a menace to society, shout out to Wrestling Gifts. At the end of 2009, he got into a rivalry with Kofi Kingston and he ended up using his backstage benefit to his advantage. He squashed Kofi's push after he messed up the finish to a triple threat match, Orton visibly yelling out "stupid" multiple times. A theme in this video is this man's attitude, and it was still a problem. So after mixing it up with some of the best stars on the face of the planet, we got to WrestleMania 26 where we got the Legacy triple threat match. Heading into Mania 26, Orton was face and he ended up winning this match after the group split. 2010 by any means wasn't a landmark year for him, but after the heel run, he was more popular with the fans. He continued to feud with the likes of Jack Swagger, Edge, and Sheamus, and won the WWE Championship at Night of Champions in a 6-pack challenge. Worked with Wade Barrett before being cashed in on by The Miz. At Mania 27, he feuded with CM Punk, hitting this iconic RKO. Punk then went on to have his summer in the WWE, but we can't forget what Orton was doing at this time either, and that was the legendary rivalry with Christian for the World Heavyweight Championship, where Orton was the face, and this time it was Christian becoming the scheming, manipulating, conniving heel. The two delivering engaging matches at Over the Limit, Money in the Bank, and SummerSlam in something that was just fresh and honestly really fun. He eventually dropped the title to Mark Henry, and then the following year he got another suspension for violating the wellness policy. This time it was 60 days. One more would have meant a termination of his contract. When he came back, it seemed like WWE was extremely cautious with him, keeping him in the mid-card feuding with Ziggler and Del Rio before eventually taking on the Shield at WrestleMania 29. A really strange period where even though he was an established top star, he was just kind of hovering around. The suspension most definitely did have something to do with it, though that's not confirmed. By July of that year, it looked like WWE was ready to run with him again as he won the Money in the Bank contract, cashing in on Daniel Bryan at SummerSlam 2013. This began the authority era for him, where he was endorsed as the face of the company by Vince McMahon and Triple H. On the other end, Daniel Bryan was slowly starting his rise, Orton playing a key role in his anti-authority story. By the end of the year, he beat John Cena to unify the WWE and World Heavyweight Championship at TLC. He eventually lost it to Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 30 after he was originally supposed to face just Batista in the main event, Bryan getting the win, ending his reign at 161 days. The night after WrestleMania 30, we'd see the beginning of the reformation of Evolution. One more time, one final run in a killer feud against the Shield, the three putting them over big time, losing 2 straight pay-per-view matches and an elimination match with a clean sweep. The eventual breakup of the Shield saw Seth Rollins join the Authority while Randy Orton continued to be part of the group too. He spent his summer putting over Roman Reigns, getting him ready for his upcoming ascension into the world title scene. Had another brief rivalry with John Cena, the two wrestling inside Hell in a Cell to determine the #1 contender to the WWE title. He lost, but he slowly broke away from the Authority, wrestled Seth Rollins at WrestleMania 31, turning face in the process, and again hitting a legendary RKO. 10 Manias after he hit that one, this time he turned a curb stomp into a catch finisher, and I guess you can just see it on your screen already. Iconic. 2015 was actually a whatever year for him. He wasn't really doing that much. He wrestled Seth Rollins for the WWE title, feuded with Sheamus through the summer months before he suffered another shoulder injury before returning in July of 2016 at Battleground. Here he set up a match with Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. This one divides a lot of opinions, some thinking it lived up to the dream match billing, while others not so much. Orton ended up losing in the main event of the show after Brock busted him open. Previously, he'd been drafted to SmackDown. In that new era, he began a feud with Bray Wyatt, eventually joining the Wyatt family. Bray and Randy, the sole survivors for Team SmackDown at that year's Survivor Series. They then beat Heath Slater and Rhino at TLC for the Tag Team Championships, and that brought us to 2017, where he again won the Royal Rumble match for the second time in his career. Don't think many of us expected that to happen. It was random, it was pretty unexpected, but nonetheless, another huge accomplishment. He chose Bray Wyatt, who had won the WWE Championship. The storyline was that he wanted to show his full devotion to Bray, but ended up turning on him anyways and burning down his compound in the process before winning the WWE title at WrestleMania 33. The match was strange, with WWE deciding to project insects and maggots and I don't even know what else onto the ring. We eventually got a House of Horrors cinematic match, which wasn't received any better. He ended up dropping the WWE title to Jinder Mahal. Then he started to feud with newer stars like Rusev and Shinsuke Nakamura. In 2018, he won the United States Championship at Fastlane, beating Bobby Roode to make him a Grand Slam champion. And then we got the return of sicko Randy Orton in the latter half of the year, doing things that I probably shouldn't show on here. And by now the dude was a veteran in the company. No more issues, no more pranks, no more douchebag Orton. Feuded with AJ Styles heading into WrestleMania 35. Made amends with Kofi when Kofi finally won the WWE title, putting him over and forming FTRKO, which probably should have lasted longer, but it didn't. 2020 saw the return of another face of the Ruthless Aggression era, and that was Edge, returning to the ring after 11 long years. His first big program was against Randy Orton. The two set to wrestle in front of a packed Raymond James Stadium. Only problem is that didn't happen due to COVID, and the two instead had an empty arena last man standing match that probably went 10 minutes longer than it should have. The rivalry continued when we got to what was labeled as the greatest wrestling match of all time at Backlash 2020. Orton winning that match after punting Edge in the head. Randy being relied upon to work with Edge, becoming one of the best parts of WWE during the COVID shutdown. In this time frame, he returned to doing what he did best, and that was killing legends, from attacking Christian to Shawn Michaels and eventually Ric Flair, night vision goggles and all. This was also a time where he won his 14th world title, feuding with Drew McIntyre, and to end 2020, he reignited his feud with Bray Wyatt, who was now going by The Fiend. Reignited and then literally ignited Bray by burning him into a crisp at TLC. We got a random no-holds-barred match between Triple H and Randy Orton on Raw, where Alexa Bliss threw a fireball into his face, and his direction for WrestleMania was pretty clear, and that was Bray Wyatt, who he beat at night 2 of WrestleMania 37. After WrestleMania, Matt Riddle started to try to get on Orton's good side and to form a tag team with him. Orton didn't want any of this. Originally, it wasn't just an on-screen thing, he actually didn't like the guy personally. Eventually, Randy warmed up to him and they formed RKBro, a dynamic we didn't know we needed but are so glad we got. The two winning the Raw Tag Team Championships at SummerSlam 2021. And through this, you could tell that Randy was just having the time of his life. In comedy skits, he seemed more loose in his matches. You can tell that he had clearly matured and wasn't the guy of days gone by. As the recording of this video, Orton suffered a back injury on May 20th, 2022, causing him to be out for over a year. There's been questions as to whether the years of him being on the road and a constant on WWE TV have caught up to him, and if that was indeed the final chapter in the Viper's career, with the majority of the news looking bad and that he won't return. But I personally wouldn't bank on him not coming back. When Voices hits, there's no doubt that whatever arena or stadium he returns in will blow the roof off the place for one of the WWE's most special stars. Orton ranks top 5 all time in world title wins for the WWE. He's literally won everything you can in the company. He's fought the biggest stars of multiple generations. There's always that line that if you could build a wrestler from the ground up, it would be Randy Orton. Smooth, proficient, not flashy, but can do everything perfectly. His career has seen ups and downs, and personally, he's been a misfit who slowly found his way and progressed in his career. He was afforded a lot of chances because the company really saw something in him, and I think he has proven that. Done it all, won it all, and beat them all. The legend of the legend killer is unlike any other.